は時間になりましたので、これより第2部の全体セッションを開始します。第2部では、日本研究者のキャリア形成についてというテーマのもとで、ご登壇者にご自身の経験や皆様へのメッセージ等をお話しいただきます。司会は日文研のボイル先生が務めてくださいます。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
皆様、こんにちは。先ご紹介いただきました日文研のボイルと申します。本日はよろしくお願いいたします。日文研に着任しましたのは昨年の10月なんですけれども、今日は初めてジャパンファウンデーションのおかげさまでこの講頭に入館できることになりましたので、それで大変ありがたいことだと思います。特にオンラインの今お集まりいただいている方々のために本日はどういうイベントかについて若干説明いたしたいと思うんですけれども、今までは各分野にジャパンファウンデーションフェローの研究内容についてその研究内容を紹介いただきまして、でこれからは日本研究者のキャリア形成についてお話になることにします。でこれからはバイリングルセッションになると思うんですけれども、すべては通訳はしませんが、we'll switch between Japanese and English as we go along, I think. We'll see how we go. Okay. Okay, so let's begin. So I'd like to start. まずはここに隣にお座りいただいているジャパンファウンデーションと関連するゲストの方々をご紹介いただきたいと思うんですけれども、皆様はご自身の自己紹介をお願いしたいと思います。まずは、はい、すぐ隣にお座りになっているグラジディアン先生の方をお願いします。
こんにちは、皆様。今日来ていただいてどうもありがとうございました。そして国際交流基金に招待していただき本当に誠に深い感謝しています。グラジディアン・マリアと申します。現在広島大学の准教授として勤めています。その自己紹介として、まずはこの機会で私の人生、今までの人生一番幸せな1年間を思い出して、国際交流基金の奨学金のフェローシップで京都大学で1年間研究ができて、一番幸せ時代のことを思い出して非常に嬉しく感じております。自己紹介ともともとというより出身はルーマニアで2000年からドイツに引っ越して、そしてその時からどんどんさまざまな学位を取って、結局2009年は音楽学で博士号を取って、その時からその後そういう話もなると思いますが、自分の学問、専門をそんなに頼らずにさまざまな就職しながら進んできてまいりました。まず一番、学問の世界でも自由な経済の世界でも勤めながらさまざまな経験を集めて、現在は広島大学の学生に学部の分野でも大学院の分野でも本物の世界のために、また自由じゃなくて本物の大人になる人生のために準備ができるように授業を行っております。というのはもともとは宝塚歌劇とかスタジオジブリのアニメーションとか、そしてグローバルメディアというものを教えながらリアルタイムリサーチ、リアルタイム研究を行って教育して次の世代、私は勉強したものは、そしてずっと 夢を見てきたものを次の世代を育てようと思っています。これでは私の自己紹介が終わりました。どうもありがとうございました。
マリア・グラジディアン先生、どうもありがとうございます。ジャパンファウンデーションフェローの幸せさについてお聞きすると、ちょっと、もう遅いかな。私はまだ経験されてないんですけれども、これから可能であればありがたいです。じゃあ、続きまして、すぐ隣にお座りになっているネサニエル・スミス先生の方をお願いします。
ありがとうございます。ナサニエル・スミスと申します。立命館大学国際関係学の准教授として務めていただいております。バイリンガル度をちょっと増していくために英語で説明させていただきます。So my name is Nathaniel Smith, and I'm currently an associate professor in the College of International Relations at立命館University, just over the hill. It's my first time here at Nichibunken, so it's really nice to see the grounds and have a bus to take me all the way here. And I hope that all of you have had a lovely time today as well. Just by way of brief introduction, I'm from California originally and started as an undergrad studying Japanese my sophomore year of college, and came to Japan the first time my junior year for a year study abroad at Sophia University. At that time, there was still a men's dormitory in the middle of campus, and so I lived in the men's dormitory on campus with Shakancho and Kari Sensei, who later became the president of the university, living on the 5th floor with 4年生, 3年生, 2年生, 1年生, and a giant bath and cafeteria on the basement level. Now it's gone, and there's a big fancy building, but that's very Tokyo. I came back to Japan after I graduated as a Monbusho Fellow to Waseda and did a Master's in International Relations at GSAPS, and then decided maybe it's not so bad to follow the academic path, and went back to the States and did a Master's in East Asian Studies and then a PhD in Anthropology at Yale. During my PhD, I was unfortunately not the beneficiary of a Japan Foundation Fellowship. I chose a different option, but was at Todai at Shaken under the sort of help and advisement of Ishida Sensei. One of the things that I think we can talk about a little bit is how all of those experiences kind of bring us to our current roles and our current sort of activities in Japan studies, and particularly for fellows that are at the PhD stage, how to move from that to work and beyond is something that we've all been thinking about. So I currently work on a project about Kabukicho in Shinjuku. I previously was doing research since 2004 on far right-wing activism in Japan, and there's a manuscript that's almost finished there, but I'll leave it my jiko shokai at that. Thank you.
Wonderful, Nathaniel, thank you. The mention of large bath in basements also took me back to experience in Hokkaido as well. Some good, some bad, but maybe we can discuss that later as well. So our final guest today, seated at the far end here, is Shu Sensei. お願いします。
本日、国際交流基金と日文研のご好意で、フェローカンファレンスに参加させていただきまして、ありがとうございました。皆さんはここでご覧の通り、私は今年4月に着任したばかりということで、あまりにもキャリアとしてはキャリアの初段階にあるということで、日本研究者のキャリア形成について語るというのは大変恐縮だと思います。主に先生方から勉強させていただくという気持ちで、今日のカンファレンスに参加させていただいております。そうですね、私はキャリアが見違いだけではなくて、日本研究者歴というのもかなり短いということです。 具体的には、もちろん2012年に来日していて、大阪大学の人間科学研究科で、主に社会学の中の社会学史という枠の中で、東アジア、帝国日本を中心とする東アジアの経済思想史、社会思想史を勉強しておりまして、本格的に日本研究者としてそういうアイデンティティができたのは、2018年の時に大阪大学文学部の日本学で助教として務めさせていただいた時からです。阪大時代から、それからドイツ日本研究所で勤めた時、それから今年帝京大学に移した後は、ずっと国際日本研究コンソーシアムにお世話になっておりまして、これからも必ず国際日本学にコミットしてくださる方々、あるいは関わっておられる方々に引き続いてご支援をいただけましたら幸いだと思います。よろしくお願いします。
はい、それで3名の素晴らしいゲストをご紹介いただきました。じゃあ、これからの進行についてなんですけれども、まずは私の方から、質問しまして、で3名からお答えと議論になって、で実は先にちょっと打ち合わせしたんで盛り上がる予定なんですけれどもと見込みしております。で最後の方にフローの方に開きたいと思いますので、皆さんも少々お待ちいただければと思います。じゃあまず最初の質問なんですけれども、まずはグラジディアン先生の方に、お聞きすると思いますが、日本研究者のキャリア形成の、最も根本的な質問になると思うんですけれども、ちょっと日本国内のジョブマーケットについてそのご自分の経験と、あとはもし他国と比較することができれば、それについてちょっと皆様にお教えいただければと思いますが。
Thank you very much for your question. I'm going to explain it, generally speaking, in English, and I'll switch a little sometimes into Japanese for very important information, what I think is very important information. So if you are emerging researchers doing your research in Japan and planning to work later on in Japan or in a Japanese-related institution, rather either in the free market or at an educational institution or research institution like Nichibunken, it's very important to have a very pragmatic approach to it. So first of all, you can look on JREC-in. This is the official site where you can find openings, and all institutions in Japan who are advertising for openings, they are compelled by law to post their job openings on JREC-in. And then you have to proactively respect religiously, I would say, the information provided by potential employees, regardless whether they are, so as I said, from the free market, so companies, or whether they are education institutions like universities or research institutions like Nichibunken, Riken, and so on. So it's very important to the documents you submit. It's very important to be very clean. So like spelling, orthography, respect the deadlines, again religiously, and if possible, try to find an insider to the institution you're applying to. So I didn't have insiders, I must be very honest from the beginning, but this is how the world works, and we have to be pragmatic, as I said. How many minutes? And so one advice would be that regardless of, not advice, so from my experience, so it's very important that well, depending, I speak from humanities perspective here. So to have something you're very good at, like your field of specialization, of expertise, but at the same time to expand, to have, like in concentric circles, to have additional areas in which you are developing expertise. For instance, in my case, as I said, I'm a musicologist, but I migrated to anthropology because you cannot really find a job with musicology, and then to media studies. And I'm teaching and researching on media studies nowadays. So, and my research focus was Takarazuka Review, but then I expanded to Studio Ghibli, then I expanded to, for instance, global media like Hollywood cinema and so on. So it's very, so that you have this flexibility. Afterwards we're going to, yeah, so that would be the major point. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what you said there about the flexibility and perhaps moving within different disciplines is something that connects all of us on stage. Daniel, did you want to?
Yeah, I can weigh in. So my first position after my PhD was at UC Santa Barbara in a 2-year faculty fellow position that was funded by the Japan Foundation. And it was part of an institutional support grant that a lot of universities in the US have received. So I was familiar with the support in that way. And then moved to the University of Arizona. And then this is going on the second year now at立命館. So kind of building from the advice about JRECN and deadlines, one thing that you'll notice if you are working in the Japanese job market is that every university has a very distinct approach to the very same things. So you're going to need your nirekisho, but you're going to need a slightly different one for nearly every university. And there are some exceptions, but the amount of kind of paperwork, if you're coming from a training that's based on the North American system or the British system, is pretty different. So that's one thing I would say to keep in mind. The other thing is that the hiring process, in my experience at Japanese universities, is kind of in between the British version and the American version. You tend to come in for very short visits. You tend to meet a very small number of people, maybe just the search committee that's doing the hiring. And it's not something like the North American model, which would be multiple days and having everything from breakfast to dinner with every person in the department and going on tours and things like that. That's not my experience of hiring here. That said, though, as the last comment made clear, having sort of a way to market yourself is important for job applications anywhere. But one of the tricky things, I think, in the Japanese system is that colleges and gakubu within universities are often doing multiple things. So if you are an anthropologist and only looking for anthropology departments, you're going to be out of luck. But you might be hired by a Seiji Keizai, or just a Keizai Gakubu, or Global Nanchara, right? So lots of different units in Japanese universities tend to want to do all of their things in-house. And what that means from the applicant standpoint is to really broadly look at the things you could potentially offer to an employer, I think is a pretty advantageous position. In my own experience at立命館, so it's Kokusai Kankegaku, so it's international relations. I have a master's in international relations, so that kind of qualifies me there. But I'm an anthropologist. What they were looking for was somebody who could do public diplomacy. I do some stuff with US-Japan relations and that kind of stuff, so I could speak to that. I could also speak to how an anthropologist might approach something like public diplomacy from a less policy-oriented position, but kind of a more critical perspective. And I lucked out because the hiring committee that was asked to hire by the department for public diplomacy happened to be almost all anthropologists. So there are things you can plan for and things that you can't. But taking a look at JRECN early and figuring out the kinds of materials you need to prepare, they're quite different, is something I would highly recommend.
Thank you. And yes, the combination of preparation and right time, right place is obviously very important for this career building in Japan and everywhere, but I think particularly it has been maybe here, maybe said to be so. Just 周先生もし。
あまり就活の経験が乏しい、ということで一つ質問だけはさせていただきたいと思うんですね。就活の時に、業績の評価の基準ですね。例えば中国で学術の世界で就活する時に評価は統一されているんです。例えば発表した論文はどのデータベースで載せていたのか、このジャーナルのインパクトファクターとか全国すべての大学では統一されているわけです。日本の場合は業績評価の基準は、どういうふうに考えればよろしいでしょうか。
立命に着任してから、そういう人事のことで関わってあるのが4件くらいですかね。で、それも着任してからびっくりしたのが、日本国内でどれだけ移籍するというか新しく入ってきて、転々と日本国内の大学から、転職する人があまりにも自分の期待よりも多いなという印象があります。でその基準が、あるのはあるんですが、満たしてれば相手にされる。で例えば論文を3兆出してれば、そういうハードルをクリアした時点で、審査に上がることもあり得ることになるんですが、その下のそれぞれの基準満たしてない人はその場でカットされます。で、結局審査員の3名とかがいる場合は、全てその3人の先生に任されることが多いんですけれども、定期的に教授会でどういう段階でどういう人数まで絞っていると、その候補者の特徴とか経歴とかについて全て報告事項として教授会で述べることがあるので、やっぱその基準を曖昧に扱っていれば、教授会に言われることが指摘されることがあります。
どうもありがとうございました。
じゃあ次のそれはそのなんていうそのキャリア形成の中の職場に応募することについてお話しいただきましたんですけれども、続きましてスミス先生は若干それに先に触れましたんですけど、自己紹介の方に触れましたと思うんですけれども、You mentioned about connections and also talked about the importance of your Japan Foundation fellowship at Santa Barbara. Could you perhaps tell us a little more about how they were crucial to your career development and what you might recommend to people who are fellows now in the audience, how they can mobilize this experience as they move forward in Japanese studies or adjacent disciplines? Hey.
そうですね。今フェローの時期に立っている人たちはみんな割と自由に動ける時期にいるかと思います。でその自由が先生として、ポストドクとして進んでいくと、削減されることがいろいろとプレッシャーがかかってくると、自分が担わなきゃいけない、行政とか、カリキュラムとかそういったところが増えていく一方、これをどういうふうに維持していくかっていうのが一つ大切な課題かと思います。でこのフェローとしている1年間ちょいにおそらく大学に所属していて、その中でまたゼミとかある受け入れの担当教員とかがいるかと思います。でそれらのコネクション付き合いとかを大事にしてと横つながり、現在同時に同期のフェローとの皆さんが少しずつ年齢もプログラムの何でしょうか、段取りが違うこともあるので、早く就職する人もいれば執筆作業で何年間かかる人もいます。なのでポストドク3つぐらいをしてからやっとテニュアトラックにつなげた人もいれば、もう一から、ABD のまんま、就職される人もいます。なので今のフェロー中の横つながりのコネ、ここにできた この部屋にいる人たちとの付き合いを十分に、との付き合いを十分に、cultivate しながら、つないでいけるといいことだと思います。でこういった場面こういった、会議とかだけでなくても、AAS とか AHA とか、人類学者だったらAAA とか、自分の所属する分野の会議学会とかにもジャパンファンデーションが開かれる、イベントとかにも出席するといいんですよ。飯も食えますんで多分ドリンク券も配ることもあるのでいろいろメリットあるんですがそういったところを利用して生かして、次に例えばISP とかそういったインスティテューショナルサポートグラントが、来年度とか2年後いつどこに出るのかで自分も、そのランドスケープを見ながら自分の位置づけも確保できるということです。
ありがとうございます。
一つだけなんですけど、先ほど学会の話をされたんですけれども、日本の学会の入会あるいは日本の学会での活動については、どう、考えておられますでしょうか。
そうですね。自分もできるだけ他大学の、招待をいただくときに、行って講演するとか研究会とかにもできるだけ自分がどんな研究をしていて人にしてもらうとまた次のチャンスとかがあると、自分のことが覚えてくれてお招きもらえると
よろしいですか。
ありがとうございました。
いやでもそういう機会も生かしてください。ぜひ。
Professor Gradian.
So of course there is this official networking procedure. I'm a stronger proponent of what I call authentic networking, which refers rather not so much looking for people from your own field, but rather looking for people and networking, not really developing friendships with people from outside your field. What I mean by this is so in order to enlarge your horizon and so to develop what I would call kind of interdisciplinary approach or multidisciplinary approach to networking. This is also very important. There is sometimes times when you don't really fit emotionally or mentally with people from your own field, but you can develop friendships with people outside, and then they will help. During those exchanges, you can gain insights into areas you otherwise wouldn't gain insights into. I think this is also very important, and by participating in this more like larger conferences, international conferences, which are maybe not so centered on specific areas or specific disciplines or specific approaches to whatever you're doing. So it's also a good factor, I would say. So to expand your circle and who you are. This is what. So not so much like rather in concentric circles. So to develop your network.
I'd like to add to that and say that we can problematize area studies or Japan studies, but one of the upsides about being here on a Japan Foundation Fellowship is that you're interacting with people who work on Japan from lots of different disciplinary perspectives that you might not see at your national level conferences. So along those lines, yes, and also just to plug the new building, go and hang out at the library if you're in Tokyo at the Japan Foundation. They have books there and they're pretty new. And you might run into somebody and have an interesting conversation you didn't expect outside of wherever your placement is.
Thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And I think that interdisciplinary conversation leads nicely into the next question that I actually wanted to ask. 今回はシュウ先生の方からお願い したいと思うんですけれども。
はい、ありがとうございました。そうですね。このポイントについてはおそらく私とボイル先生は共通するところがあるのではないかと思うんですね。例えばボイル先生のご専門、法学部、卒業ということで、私の方はソシオロジー、ということなんですけれども、ただ自分の研究を発信するときに、例えばエリアスタディーズ、ジャパニーズスタディーズ、あるいはイーストエーシャンスタディーズのジャーナルで発信するか、それとも、例えばポリティカルサイエンスとかエコノミクスのジャーナルで発信するかというのは、おそらくキャリアの初期段階から決めた方がいいのかなと思うんですけれども、もし両方発信してしまうと、確かに就職するときに、具体的にどこで就職道があるか、というのは、ややこしくなるのではないかと思うんですけれども、でも今日の先生方はほぼ同じような、問題を抱いておられるのかなと思うんですけれども、皆さんのご意見はいかがでしょうか。
同感です。
Can I ask a little more? なんていう日本研究者のあり方についてもうちょっとお話しいただきたいんですけれども、どうですか？日本研究者はどういうもの、どういう人ですか？
これは前日長野さんが兵学に来られた時でも、少し議論しました。日本研究者とは誰かと聞かれるとすぐピンとこないですよね。それはジャパニーズ・スタディーズに属している人なのか、それとも研究の中で日本を触れる人なのか、というところは定義はちょっと定義しにくい概念ではないかと思うんですけれども。
ありがとうございます。I'd like to ask the other two as well, but just before I do so, I'd like to share about 2 months ago we had the German-Japanese Institute came to Nichibunken to conclude a research agreement, and we had a evening seminar. But the director of the DIJ, Franz Waldenberger, was talking about why to study Japan, and he had 4 things in particular, which is the first was Japan for its own sake, so as in it is interesting because it's there. The second one perhaps applied more in the past, but Japan for its importance. So definitely 1980s, 1990s, this was sort of referred to Japan's spectacular economic growth and economic clout in the world. And I think there are elements where Japan is still very important in the world today. And the third one was sort of Japan as a site of interest, because it is it sort of seems to be facing many issues and many problems that are also shared by many other countries around the world. So Japan in a comparative frame, but also as a harbinger of problems that may also occur in other societies. So particularly thinking of demographics in this case. And the fourth he mentioned was as Japan as a partner, and how this is from externally, from Germany's perspective in this case, how knowledge about Japan would enable the two countries to better partner with one another. So these 4 perspectives on Japan. I was just wondering if you, taking those on board, perhaps if first Gradian Sensei and then Smith Sensei, you'd like to comment on, as Japan researchers or Nihon Kenkyusha, what you think we should be doing, or what can be done within that sort of labeling. So, Gradian Sensei.
So thank you very much. So I find these 4 points incredibly interesting. Thank you for sharing this with us and with me. From the 4 points, I find it particularly interesting and powerful for us as non-Japanese researching on Japan. The third one related to Japan as a kind of harbinger of problems which will come to Western and non-Western societies later on. And I think this is so. In order to to think about the future, in order to think about the future and not allow the future to happen to us as it has been happening until now. So in order to take over so to say, not to take over the control over the future, we cannot do that, but to learn from the past and then to try to navigate the challenges of the future. Japan is a very good starting point, I would say. So there are two approaches to that. Do we do it from a discipline perspective, or do we do it from an area studies perspective on one hand, and on the other hand is, do we encourage research in depth, or do we encourage research at large? So this is like questions and challenges when we deal with Japan and doing research in Japan. So one can study, biochemistry in Japan. It doesn't have a relation to Japanese studies, Japanese culture, Japanese society, but it is happening at the Japanese university. And I had a third point which I cannot remember. But so these are all questions which people like me, for instance, are facing and trying to find answers to.
Okay, if you remember, we'll come back to you. But go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we wear all those hats, right? Because a lot of us who work and study something in Japan came to it because we were interested in it. There was something intrinsic there, right, that makes you think, this is something I want to spend years and years and years and years of my life on. That's one, but we also wear lots of hats in the roles that we play, right? So if I'm teaching to undergrads who came because at Arizona, they really liked a particular anime, like I have to meet them where they are, right? And try to give them a little bit more to go home with. And so I think that we do that. It's really wonderful to get to have a Japan-only conversation about your particular niche. That can feel really wonderful. But there are lots of times where our task is to take the Japan conversation and bring it out to a worldwide scale, right? And that's something that we do in different products, in different roles that we play in teaching or in writing or in researching. One of the differences that I've noticed between teaching at Arizona and teaching at立命館is that I could have a completely dedicated to Japan class at Arizona, and students loved that, and that was what they were there for. And it was distant enough that I always tried to bring things back to things they would know so that they didn't let it just stay in Japan. At Ritsumei, our students are from a much more diverse set of places, and I found that there's much more of an emphasis on discipline and how to take a Japan case and do the harbinger argument or the parallel argument or the divergence argument with Japan among a number of cases. So thinking about sort of audience, I think, is probably a real important thing.
Okay, thank you. So that the discussion about how to I think foster a variety of Japanese studies which can speak to a variety of constituencies is very central both to the mission of Nichibunken here and I suspect to the Japan Foundation as well. So I think it's good we've come back to that. I had one. There were a couple more questions I wanted to ask those on stage, which was how we could better support researchers within Japanese studies. And then also to talk a little bit about perhaps Corona. But as also we are running a little bit out of time, 時間も限られてますので、この場でフローの方にも開けたいと思いますが、もしこの機会を If you have anything you want to ask our expert guests, then do please seize the day. And there are people circulating with microphones, I believe. So,
while you're thinking of questions, I will say thank you so much for being here after years potentially of having to wait before getting into the country. The fact that you are still willing and able is lucky, but also your resolve and your interest.
So while our audience is Igarashi Sensei, onegaishimasu.
Hi, I'm Yoshi Igarashi, and I want to ask you questions about you guys have both experience teaching in Japan, elsewhere. So how do you compare your experiences, for example, teaching in the United States not in the classroom setting, but otherwise, administrative responsibilities or otherwise issues. And how does teaching in Japan fare to, for example, your experience in other countries?
So I don't know who wants. Do you want to take it?
Yeah, I think it probably depends on where you are in Japan. There are a lot of very international departments with students who've, a wide array of language ability or educational experience. For us, our grad students are overwhelmingly international. There are a good number of Japanese grad students, but a lot of them are international. And there are people that were thinking, do I want to go to the States or Australia or Europe or wherever? And this was one of the options. For undergrads, about a third are very international and at least taking classes in English. So it's probably, I don't know.
All right, so this is my prejudice that, in the US, you're protected from administrative work by and large. I mean, there's a large administrative structure outside of teaching structure, right? And I hear very much in Japan, a lot of things on your shoulders. The teachers will have to do many administrative stuff. So do you feel overburdened by that?
I think we can all speak to the culture of meetings. That's pretty well known for Japanese universities. A lot of the meetings are hokoku jiko, not shingi jiko. So as long as you're listening, sort of, it's fine. But in terms of administration, at Arizona, we had a little over 20 faculty and 1 secretary, and then a combined kind of admin clump for like 8 different departments. And at Kokkan, we have 50 faculty and 25 staff members. And so even if you are supposed to do nyushi or something like this, there's somebody who knows what you're supposed to do, and they kind of prep it for you, and then you kind of put the imprimatur on it.
So, Graduate Sensei?
So my experience both at Nagasaki University and at Hiroshima University afterwards, compared, for instance, to Heidelberg University in Germany, is that as a foreign teaching staff, it's very important to learn and to know very well Japanese, because Japanese students, undergraduate students, are very, very keen on taking classes to non-Japanese teachers like myself, but in Japanese. So not in English. And somehow the university gets this wrong. I'm sorry, it's not, but encourages us to teach in English, but Japanese students are not coming because they don't feel so confident in attending classes in English. But when I teach in Japanese, and I have to teach in Japanese as well, Japanese students are coming, like they had to put a cap on the number allowed to participate in order not to overflow the participants. So this is, I would say, the biggest impact. If you plan to teach in Japan at Japanese university, the biggest impact you could have is to be able to teach in Japanese so well that you can address Japanese students, even if Japanese is not perfect. My Japanese is not perfect. It's very, very far away from anything. But they are so happy, and they're coming, and there is already waiting lists and so on. So I would strongly encourage you to learn Japanese at the level that you can communicate proficiently with the younger generation. That would be my strongest advice.
I've had the same experience, and making that clear on the job market is really important too, because some departments will shy from somebody who can't do all the kind of curriculum and committee kind of stuff. But if you are a foreign hire and can speak Japanese to a fairly decent level, people give you a lot of flexibility to understand poor grammar or something like that, so long as you can do committee work.
Okay, and Shu Sensei, お願いします。
はい、ありがとうございました。そうですね、私は海外で、日本研究を教えた経験がないですけれども、しかも日本国内では基本的に日本人の学生を向けに、日本思想史とかを教えている、という立場なんですけれども、一つだけは補足させていただきたいです。日本の大学、一言で言えば日本の大学、それはいろんな大学の種類があるんですけれども、しかも大学のなんとか種類によって授業のやり方とかミッションは全然違いますので、必ず私たちは研究者として、自分自身のミッションは、勤め先のミッションとできるだけ、良いバランスを、 見つけるということは大事ではないかと思うんですけれども、例えば私は大阪大学と、ドイツ日本研究所、それから帝京大学という、全く、異なる組織で働いたことがあるんですけれども、確かに組織の、種類によって、ミッションは全く違いますから、必ず、自分自身のミッションもなくさない、ように組織のミッションと、うまくつながるような努力は必要だと思います。ありがとうございました。
Thank you. I think we have one more time for one more question. We sorry, how many hands have I got? 1, 2. And 3. There was a third. Okay, 30-second questions and 30-second answers, and then so 1, 2. And 3 towards the back. I think maybe just stand up and shout at this point. If you could stand up if you have a question, so people with the mics can see you.
Yeah, okay, now that you know where I am, I'll sit down again. I'm Alistair Swell from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand. Currently in... Which one is it? Oh? Okay, whatever. Yeah. So, we have a couple months doing research for a book. I think it's really fascinating, the overlap between the culture of the Japanese university and what's happening internationally. Very quickly, if you're trying to get a job in Australia, New Zealand, or Britain, it's research. And where are you research? Where are you publishing? Journal articles are usually better than even books. Okay. What I'd like to ask you is what your experience has been in terms of expectations around channels of publishing and also the language of publishing. So briefly, if you could comment on that, I'd be very interested to hear what your experience is.
Okay, because of time, one of you for about 20 seconds.
I've seen a few people go up from for promotion, and it was pretty flexible within our department for language, depending on what their research interests were. And that basically the kijun was you needed to have 6 articles to go from Jun Kyoju to Kyoju within 6 years.
That's pretty generous.
Thank you. We can talk more about this later, I hope. Who else had a question, if you could?
Thank you so much for your presentation. This is Conrad from North University. My question is, if you work at academic institution in Japan, is it difficult to publish major publishing companies like Harvard University Press or Union Press? Is it easy or difficult to publishing that kind of publishing?
No, it's like if your paper is good, you can publish anywhere. But unlike your experiences, that at least at national universities, seniority system is the foundation, the main standard. But you can publish anywhere if your paper is good.
Faculty in our department publish all over the place. Yeah, outside of Japan as well as Japanese presses.
Okay, thank you. And there was one more, I think. Oh. Or perhaps 2 more.
私今日の話の中では日本研究者はどういうふうにサポートしていくかというね、まず日本20年前には日本の文部省は学術論文、学術学位というのを作って、そこでは外国人に稼ぎを与えてもらっていて、そして私たち今世界中で大学に勤務することができたんですけれども、問題は先生たちが今昇格するのに、日本の各大学が発表している論文にはインパクトファクトルというね、あんまりないんですよね、日本の技術雑誌とかね。それがないと、今僕は海外大学の学科長として僕にからやってきたんですけど、今僕の部下は今なかなか昇格できないんですよね。日本研究者が日本語で論文を書いて日本の雑誌に記載するんですけれども、実際には日本の雑誌のほとんど、大学の雑誌のほとんどにはインパクトファクターがないんですよ。それが最近技術ではそれが認められないから非常に困っているんですね。本当日本研究者とは何か、これはジャパンルールというんですけども、日本の技術の上に、またもし日本語できてもできなくても、日本の研究する人間は、これらは日本研究者であって、問題はですね、 日本で研究して自分の国に戻ったときに、その後シンポジウムとか学会がないから、非常にここでこの日本研究者は自分の研究活動を止めるんですが、やっぱりネットワークが作る必要があります。例えば国際交流基金が、自分たちのフェローだけの、ネットワークを作るのではなくて、文部省の留学生とか、日本で留学に来た人間、国際交流基金の治療を持って、自分の国に戻った後、その人たちのネットワークを作らなければならない。例えば私は海外大学では毎年、日本研究をテーマにシンポジウムをやってるんですよ。その中でね、アラブで全然素晴らしい研究者がいるんですね。モロッコとか、リバノンとか。
すいません、ちょっと時間も限られていますので。
どういうふうにしたら作れるかという質問ですね。
はい、ありがとうございます。すいません、貴重なコメントとして取り扱いまして、すいません、もう時間になりましたんですけれども、じゃあ、すいません、最後の方に今日お越しいただきました3名の素晴らしいゲストに温かい拍手をお願いします。じゃあお渡しします。
はい、それでは、先生方どうもありがとうございました。